Good evening and welcome to the UAW Region A Director Candidate Forum at Columbia University. My name is Barbara Madeloni. I'm a staff organizer and writer at Labor Notes, and I will be moderating this forum this evening. Before we get started, I just want to say that I'm really grateful for the opportunity to be part of this forum and therefore part of this election, which is the first in UAW where members will be able to vote directly for their leadership. This forum is being hosted by workers in the 3 UAW locals at Columbia University, 2710, 4100, and 2110. I'm going to take a few minutes first to just explain how we got here with the questions and the format that we'll be using. The questions for the candidates were solicited from the workers at Columbia University and selected at an open meeting through a democratic process. The questions have not been edited. Candidates received copies of the questions 5 days ago. We will begin with each candidate having 3 minutes to introduce themselves. We'll then proceed with the questions. For each question, each candidate will have 2 minutes to respond. Then there will be 2 rounds of 1 minute rebuttal or comment. So it will be 2 minutes, 2 minutes, 1 minute, 1 minute, 1 minute, 1 minute. The first question will go to Beverley Brakeman, and then we'll alternate who goes first. Candidates, just so you know, are able to see the time, and I'll intervene if candidates go beyond their time. So with that, again, thank you all for being here, and I will invite Beverley Brakeman to make her opening remarks and introduction.
Hi, everyone. I want to thank the organizers and for organizing this event and Barbara for moderating the event. I'm Beverley Brakeman. I've been a UAW Local 376 member for 18 years. Before joining the UAW staff, I was a rank and file member with a small nonprofit called Citizens for Economic Opportunity, which was a unit of the Connecticut Citizen Action Group. In 2008, I joined the UAW staff and served as a member organizer, a CAP rep, assistant director, and now regional director. I am proud to be the Region 9A Working Together for Justice candidate and a member of the Curry Solidarity team. Before coming to UAW, I worked in the movements against gender-based violence, marriage equality, universal health care, and mental health awareness. I'm a single mom to 2 daughters and was raised by one of the first women in Connecticut to be ordained as an Episcopal priest. From her, I learned that as a woman, you have to work harder to get what you want. My dad, who died in 2020, did not share my political or world views, but from him, I learned that kindness always matters. I believe these lessons have served me well in the UAW. Our region has a long history of being at the forefront of new organizing in the UAW, fighting for strong contracts and pushing progressive political action to fight for a more just and inclusive society. Unfortunately, that vision came under attack in 2018 when I was elected by new President Gary Jones, who tried to eliminate most of the resources for our highly successful higher education organizing program and more. As a newly elected director and one of the only 2 women on the board, this was trial by fire. But working closely with our members, I never backed down and we continued to grow. My approach to leadership emphasizes collaboration. This has allowed me to gain the knowledge, relationships, and experience to help bring members together to fight for both common and specific goals. Some of the great things we've done together is we've organized more new units than other UAW regions, established the first ever manufacturing roundtable, built coalitions in Puerto Rico to navigate the Commonwealth bankruptcy, led the national strategy to preserve the historic Columbia decision through the Trump years, secured new resources to strengthen museum legal services and auto tech organizing, expanded and institutionalized our work addressing systemic inequality and racism, continued our successful lobbying programs across the region, advocating on a range of issues that help workers across all sectors, and established the first ever Region 9A digital newsletter. If elected, I will continue to work collaboratively to advance our vision on organizing, bargaining, political action, addressing systemic inequality, strengthening local unions, and continuing to be a voice of reform on our IEB. Thank you.
Thank you, Beverley. And now, Brandon, if you want to give your introductory remarks.
Yeah, thank you, Barbara. And thank you to all the organizers and workers at Columbia University who have put this forum together. This election forum is what this election and my platform is all about, bringing together different kinds of workers across different units and across different locals together to have a tough conversation about the issues that we're all facing as we go into this election. So my name is Brandon Mancilla. I am a member and a former founding president of HGSU, the Harvard Graduate Students Union, Local 5118 of the UAW. I was president from the fall of 2020 through February of this year, 2022. And I'm currently the staff organizer or one of the staff organizers on a team at the Association of Legal Aid Attorneys, UAW 2325. My experience at HGSU began from the organizing drive. The organizing drive kicked off in 2015. I arrived on campus as a graduate student in 2017. And through that, I became a rank and file leader. Leaders and organizers within the HGSU organizing committee opened space for folks to come through and develop the skills and the talent and the voice to be able to lead that campaign from the ground up, from the bottom up. We went on a 29-day strike. I participated in that strike, and I was on the strike coordinating committee that made a real disruption on campus and learned how to fight in the trenches against the wealthiest university in the world. I was elected president of the local in 2020 once we settled the first contract. It was a one-year contract, so we had to set up a local. We had to enforce grievances, aggressively enforce a contract, set up an entire local with entire structure and different subcommittees and working groups, and also begin a second contract bargaining campaign, which resulted in a strike and a second contract. All during that entire time, having an eye on building a real democratic local, since we didn't want to just do business as usual. At ALA, I'm continuing that work as a staff organizer, empowering members in our different shops, establishing within established annually organized shops to win strong contracts, fight the boss, and prepare for the coming fight to have a sector-wide strategy for legal services, especially in New York City. I'm running because I am tired of the UAW leadership being an obstacle to building a strong labor movement through its corruption, undemocratic practices, culture of favoritism, and risk aversion. I, alongside thousands of workers who have joined the UAW in recent years, have joined it to make it stronger and to build the strength of a diverse working class. We demand not only better, but a union that understands that control lies with the membership, not our friends in leadership and on staff. With this election, we have an opportunity to take a step in a new direction, one in which new organizing, a sectoral approach to organizing, and rank and file democracy go hand in hand. Members demand a UAW that empowers them to win, not manages them into concessions, tiers, and corruptions. This fall, vote Members United and vote me for regional director. Thank you.
Thank you, Brandon. We'll now go to our first question. Beverley Brakeman will respond first, and Brandon Mancilla will respond second. Beverley Brakeman, you are running on the Curry Solidarity Team, a slate composed of incumbent International Executive Board officers. Your campaign is called Working Together for Justice. Please give us an overview of what your platform is and what it stands for. What distinguishes your platform from Brandon Mancilla's? Brandon Mancilla, you are running on the Members United slate, a slate composed of UAW members who have never held office on the International Executive Board. Your campaign is called A New Direction for 9A. Please give us an overview of what your platform is and what it stands for. What distinguishes your platform from Beverley Brakeman's? Beverley?
Great. Thank you, Barbara. My platform centers around expanding on the things we have done well and building on that record of success, organizing the unorganized, assisting local unions to bargain and enforce strong contracts, building strategic political power, fighting systemic equality in all of our work, and fighting for reform, leader accountability, and transparency, both in the region and on our IEB. We aim to help more workers organize in higher ed, legal services, auto tech, and cultural institutions. We see our manufacturing roundtable as a space to develop strategies to identify strategic organizing opportunities and build off of our most recent success, eliminating tiers at firearms. We secured temporary organizers and other resources to local unions for organizing new members, negotiating first contracts, and building power. We have sponsored more than 25 member-driven forums and trainings on issues addressing systemic inequality, racism, gender bias, and discrimination. I think what distinguishes my platform from Brandon's is my experience. I have successfully led this region for 4 years, and for 14 years before that, I've worked and done a lot of work, doing every aspect of our work to organize and protect workers' rights and fight for economic and social justice. As regional director, I believe it is my role to create inclusive and dynamic spaces for rank and file members to discuss, debate, and dialogue on issues important to all of us. Could we do better? Absolutely, always. I think this is the type of regional discussion could be very beneficial around I think the type of regional discussion that we could have that would be beneficial would be around regional organizing strategies, building collective political and legislative power more than we do now, and identifying ways we can broaden the collective bargaining and contract enforcement processes to address larger community-wide issues.
Thank you. And Brandon, your answer, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you. My platform is based on continuing the work that was started with the victory of one member, one vote, which means empowering the membership to take on the struggles that we have ahead, whether they're tough contract fights, sectoral organizing and bargaining strategy, or political battles that win justice in our cities and our communities. So the right to directly elect top leaders is just the start. One member, one vote on its own isn't going to deliver us a stronger union equipped to face all the different crises we're facing. So we need leadership that's able to take the lead from the base, from the membership. My platform was drafted through collective work with members across different locals and units, meaning I was listening directly to members who believe our region needs to move away from its undemocratic practices and this culture of isolation that I'm happy to talk more about, towards an actual unifying strategy within units and across units and across locals and across sectors. So the planks of the platform are fighting for stronger contracts and planning beyond collective bargaining, empowering locals and rank and file organizers, organizing the unorganized, expanding democracy, building solidarity unionism, and ending corruption and increasing transparency. Building union density and power goes hand in hand with the rank and file strategy of union democracy. So if the UAW is going to organize hundreds of thousands of workers, if not more, we'll need a vision inspired by the Members United Slate, which is a group of battle-tested candidates, local leaders and organizers across different regions who see the problems within the current UAW and the problems which the incumbents cannot solve. So my opponent and her slate are running on pure incumbency and an allegiance to the way things have been done, meaning overseeing a period of the union, which the union is at a crisis point. And you all deserve better as a membership, and you have a chance to do that with Members United. Thank
you. And Beverly, you have 1 minute for comments, rebuttal.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you, Brandon. I think the comment that you are getting your direction directly from members because you listen to members and that the current culture of our institution is one of isolation is frankly just not true. I have spent 18 years in this union listening to members. I have led this region with tremendous transparency and accountability. And I think a lot of our leaders would disagree strongly with your characterization that the current leaders, that the only leaders are battle tested are the ones on the UAW Members United slate. So I think it's important to understand that there's a lot of experience that goes into this job, and I have a lot of that to bring to the table, and that comes from listening to our members and our leaders.
Thank you. Brandon, you have 1 minute.
My response to that is, who do we listen to, right? I think when I'm talking about this culture of isolation, of course, presidents and a few other staff and local leaders and unit leaders speak to one another. What we need to be doing is deepening our organizing strategy to be learning from members themselves. When a contract passes, for example, that doesn't mean that that contract met the expectations of the membership. And if there was no strategy to go into that bargaining process because there was no membership engagement, that's whatever the leader says is going to be what the leader says. That actually doesn't point to the deeper issue here, which is that we actually don't have an engaged membership. And instead of saying, well, the members don't care, right, and I'm just going to listen to a few leaders who do show up to a meeting, what we need to be doing is asking that question, like, what kinds of avenues are we creating for membership to get engaged? And then actually not obstructing those avenues of participation. And that's what I'm committing to.
And back to you, Beverly.
Yeah, I actually completely agree with you, Brandon. I absolutely agree. We should do a better job of including rank and file members and leaders in all of our discussions at the regional level, and that's something that I have tried to do in our region, and am committed to continue to do and do better and do more of it. So I appreciate that and agree with you on that. Thanks.
And Brandon, you have 1 more minute if you'd like.
Yeah, so I think, the stakes of this election are quite big. And I think, it's one slate exists and another slate is also running. But I think we need to be clear about what this means. The Courage Solidarity Team is what the administration caucus has branded itself for the purposes of this election. An election that I may add, they did not want to see happen. The AC is a group within the UAW that has controlled the union for nearly 7 decades, and under their rule is when we've seen the corruption scandals, the massive decline in membership in auto and manufacturing, and the repression of dissent. My opponent, Beverley Brakeman, decided to run for office first in 2018 on Gary Jones's slate, the president who was ultimately sentenced for corruption. And the current candidate, Ray Curry, was Jones's running mate. So we know that we can't trust these candidates' judgment. We've turned a page. We have not turned yet the page on the different issues facing the UAW. There are multiple investigations still happening. And it's not just about a few bad apples. It's about actually building a movement to build democracy.
Thank you. We'll now move on to the second question, and Brandon Mancilla will respond first, and Beverley Brakeman will respond second. During the campaign for the referendum on direct elections for top UAW officers, before the issue was decided by the membership in November 2021, did you support the one member, one vote referendum? Why or why not? Please include in your response any positions you took at meetings during the referendum campaign. Brandon?
Yeah, so I've been in favor of direct democracy and reform in the UAW since the days of our organizing drive at HCSU, because I saw the impact that the news of corruption had on workers who hesitated to wanting to join the UAW because of what they were hearing. When we fought back against that and successfully won our union within the UAW, but I would lie if I said that wasn't a major obstacle to overcome with many workers. When the consent decree ordered a referendum, I immediately supported one member, one vote and direct elections vocally and publicly, not just amongst peers. I joined UAWD, the Reform Caucus, most heavily pushing for one member, one vote, and became excited to support efforts within my own local to organize for it. Our leadership and our membership were actually united and excited to support the effort. So, and at regional meetings when I was president, I was vocal in my support for one member, one vote. My local ended up voting over 97% in favor of one member, one vote, which was the largest margin of any local in the entire UAW for direct elections. And a little bit more about that, I've touched on this. I support one member, one vote because I believe that members should have, well, firstly, direct choice over who represents them in the largest or the highest governing body. But in this election, I'm the only candidate of the two who supported that choice for you to elect us. But one member, one vote is much bigger than that. Democracy is key to building a strong union that engages the membership, develops ambitious bargaining and political campaigns, that very advocacy that we're discussing. Democracy is what wins you strong contracts and it executes effective strikes. So it's not just about representation and who gets to, sit on the board. It's about actually building the rank and file power, and that's the power that you need to change the UAW in a direction that can actually face the issues that we need to be confronting today as workers.
Okay, thank you. And Beverly?
Thanks, Barbara. So yeah, Brandon's right. Actually, we held a region-wide forum to discuss the issue of one member, one vote in direct elections, and members on both sides of the issue were given equal opportunity to advocate their position. It was a very robust discussion. At that forum, I said I was not convinced that direct elections would eliminate the possibility of corruption, which was a primary argument being made by advocates for direct elections. Local union members who don't agree with the current leadership have an equal opportunity to elect convention delegates who agree with them in the delegate system. However, I was also clear that the members being able to make this decision was what was most important. Ultimately, the members voted for direct elections, and I stand by that decision because I support democracy. I might also add that as somebody who was elected in 2018 under the delegate system, I was actually one of the first people to ask former President Gary Jones to step down, along with President Ray Curry. I was also not quiet when we had another board member alleged to have committed sexual harassment. And I was very vocal on all the issues confronting our union and the corruption. And I'm very, very proud of that. And that is something that I will continue to do if I am elected for another 4 years.
Okay, thank you. Brandon, you have 1 minute to respond.
Yeah, I think what we need an answer to from you, Bev, is why it is that you will continue to run with the Curry Solidarity Team in the administration caucus, given that you say you had reservations and you spoke up against Jones and the other board member who was accused of assault. I think we need a clear answer on that, because I think even within the region, you're working together for justice group. That seems to me like a sign that not even all of 9A's leaders are totally okay with the position that we're in within the grander UAW. And I think that we need a clear answer on that, because we need to know from our leadership why they continue to align with the same caucus that has caused all these problems and been in the middle of all these problems. And one thing I also say, it's easy to respect the decision of something once a federal monitor has been put in place to stop corruption amongst the fellow members of the IEB. But we need leaders who don't simply just go with that decision. We need to actually organize.
Stop. Thank you. Brandon, that was your time. Beverly, 1 minute to you.
Thanks. I think I've been pretty clear about this, Brandon. You've been to a lot of meetings and you know what I've said. I am running on the Ray Curry Solidarity Team because we are the people that got rid of the corruption in this union. We are the people that stood up to Gary Jones and Vance Pearson and Dennis Williams. And those people don't align with our values as a caucus, as a union, or as a region. And they are no longer members of the caucus, their union, or the region. So that is why I am running with this group of people. Had I had reservations about some of the people? Absolutely. For sure I did. But overall, this was a decision I made because I believe it is in the best interest of our members in our region. And the Working Together for Justice Caucus is a space for us in this region to talk about what is unique to our region in terms of our vision and our goals. And you came to those meetings, so you know what those are about. You've worked within that structure.
Okay, thank you. And Brandon, you have 1 more minute.
I think it's a real misunderstanding of what's happened in this historical moment to say that the administration caucus has disciplined the administration caucus. Literally, the government, the state had to come in to fix things. And then the membership had to vote out, had to change the system of voting. That's what happened. And that was the result of decades of efforts by members, especially in the auto and manufacturing sectors, who had to struggle and risk their jobs and their livelihoods and their family's security and peace of mind to be able to achieve the result we're in today. So that is frankly like insulting to believe that we should be crediting the same team who is being forced through all these changes to actually applaud them for making these changes. They were forced to make them. That's what happened. And I think we need to be honest about that. And as to like what meetings we went to, listen, like the regional meetings, I went to regional meetings. I didn't go to no Working Together for Justice meetings. If the regional meetings are also working together for justice meetings, that needs to be clear from now on.
Thank you. Beverly, you have 1 minute.
Look, I'm proud to have stood up with President Curry and these other people against the corruption. You know, there are people in a caucus, and there are bad people and there are good people. And I know you don't like that characterization, but having lived through 4 years of it and having lived through some very, very challenging times where I was outspoken, I was alone, I was often fought with, but I did it and I stuck with this group. And I don't care whether you credit anyone with it or not. What I'm saying is I'm running to be the leader of this region because I believe in our vision and I believe in our union and I love our union and I love our members. And that's what I'm about. And that's why I believe I'm the best candidate to run this region for the next 4 years.
Okay, I'm going to move on to the next question. Beverley Brakeman will respond first to this question and Brandon Mancilla will respond second. In what capacity have you been involved in bargaining contracts? Have you ever participated in contract negotiations that were open to direct observation or participation from the rank and file membership of the union, that is, open bargaining? Generally, do you prefer the practice of open bargaining or closed-door bargaining? And what do you consider to be its advantages over the other? Under which circumstances would you prefer open bargaining over closed-door bargaining and vice versa? Beverley.
Great, thank you. It's a great question. I believe that both bargaining strategies can be very effective and can engage members in many different ways. Ultimately, however, I believe that the bargaining strategy, whether it's traditional or open, should be decided and based on what the workers and the elected bargaining committee leaders in the unit think will help them gain the most power to get the strongest contract. Pope Firearms is a great example of traditional bargaining that resulted in eliminating tiers. Many of our higher education contracts have been openly bargained and resulted in very strong contracts. I've been involved in bargaining contracts with New School student employees, NAPA, Transdev, Colt Firearms, Foxwoods, and more. I've also acted in a supportive role as needed. I've been at the table to reflect support from the international and the region, building political pressure, securing resources needed to support the bargaining, approving strike authorization requests, working directly with the strike department so workers are trained, resourced, and paid, and more. At the New School, we didn't have open bargaining per se, but we had workers come in particular times to drive home important issues like healthcare and discrimination, and that was highly effective. In the end, the real power is not at the bargaining table, but rather the power of the workers in the unit through majority participation in direct actions, pressure from outside sources that matter to the employer, and other forms of collective action that engage and involve members in the collective struggle.
Thank you. Brandon, you have 2 minutes.
Yeah, so there's been a lot of talk about experience in this campaign, and when it comes to bargaining, I am the experienced candidate in the race when it comes to bargaining. I've served in every role and in every moment of negotiations that you can think of in 2 different industries. As president of HESU, I served on the bargaining committee for our second contract, and on my current staff job at 2325 ALA, my primary responsibility is to work with shop leaders and members to organize bargaining campaigns, and right now on 9 different units. I've worked on, that means 9 different contracts. 4 of these negotiations were for first contracts at shops that won recognition. 3 of them are second, and the bargaining committees of 4 of the 9 I was working with have ratified with overwhelming support of the membership. In my experience at the bargaining table, whether I'm, lead negotiator or there as a support, I take the lead from the members of the bargaining committee and constantly emphasize consulting and engaging and bringing in the membership and different member-run working groups that exist within the shop or local. I'm also an advocate for open bargaining, where members are present at negotiations and have held trainings on those, and have had open bargaining at both HESU and at ALA. I'm working with members right now at ALA at 2 different shops that are trying open bargaining to empower them at the table. Open bargaining is powerful for many reasons. 1, it keeps your own bargaining committee accountable. 2, it puts the pressure on management who are actually very unsettled by the presence of members. And three, it's a key part of having a strong bargaining campaign. And that last part is key because you'll hear leaders and staff complain a lot about disengaged membership, but then they put roadblocks up for their own members' active participation. And open bargaining is a way to break through with that. It always results in members being pissed off at the boss and actually, siding with the union's bargaining committee to fight for more. So if you want to fire up membership, you want open bargaining. And I know that's something that as a regional leader, I would encourage and also
Time.
have things on.
Thank you. Beverly, you have 1 minute.
Thanks. Actually, you're probably right about that, Brandon. You have directly bargained more contracts than I have, but I've done a lot more than that, and I have a staff of eight people who bargain contracts and work with local unions who are responsible for bargaining contracts for their members. So have I sat at as many bargaining tables as you? No, I have not. But have I done tons and tons of other things that perhaps in your 2 years experience here in the union or 3 years experience you haven't done? Yeah, I have. So I take a little bit of issue with that. If we want a regional director whose primary experience is bargaining contracts, then I fail to see how we're going to have a rank and file, fiercely militant union if that's the experience that we're looking for.
Thank you. Brandon, you have 1 minute.
I think, our power as membership starts with the campaigns that we wage, right? Under current labor law and under this current structure of how we do business as unions, bargaining is the primary sort of place we put in our efforts after our organizing drives. So, as regional director, I think one of the things that's clear about my platform is just how important bargaining has to be to our region, because it currently isn't. Bargaining one contract at one place and starting from scratch and having to learn everything from scratch is a really detrimental way to keep organizing. We need to be learning from each other. And open bargaining is one of those strategies. And I'll push back against this conception that open bargaining is just a higher ed thing. I learned open bargaining from custodians, from nurses, from different sectors of workers that are not just higher ed workers or academic workers, to be more specific. Like the open bargaining is something that should be encouraged. It's not the only way to bargain, absolutely not, but it's something that's more widespread than was said.
Beverly, 1 minute.
Yeah, thank you. No, I apologize for getting a little heated. Yeah, no, I don't believe I said that open bargaining was something that has only happened in higher education. And I would repeat also what I said, which is that I think both of those strategies can be used very effectively and have been used very effectively in our region and in our union. So I think that would be my only response to that.
And Brandon, you have 1 more minute.
Yeah, so I know the question was more specific on open bargaining, but I would say, open bargaining isn't the only way. And I think I would agree with you, Bev, there, that I think there's many different ways to approach bargaining. But the key part is transparency and engagement. You can have bargaining that isn't all the members always coming to bargaining, but is still transparent and engaging and actively building a campaign. And that does not happen everywhere. It just doesn't. Where we've seen it happen, it's because the organizing committees, the bargaining committees, the different membership meeting spaces have actively pushed for it to happen. If you left it up to your staff, it wouldn't happen. And I think that's what needs to change. And I personally look forward to working with the staff with knowledge of all the different sectors in 9A. Like, that's absolutely crucial. There's not one way to do this. We're going to be able to, we need to know what participation engagement looks like in the different sectors and locals.
Okay, I'm going to stop you there because the clock was a little late, but thank you. Okay. We'll move on to the next question now. Brandon Mancilla will respond first and Beverley Brakeman will respond second. Employers typically union bust by attempting to exclude workers from the certified bargaining unit when bargaining the recognition clause of a contract. How do you propose ending this bargaining practice of quid pro quo trades between excluding workers from the bargaining unit in exchange for better workplace protections and benefits for those who remain included. Brandon?
So, so I believe that because a recognition clause is not a mandatory subject of bargaining, then as a union, we need to start acting like that. Employers cannot impose a different unit than the one that was certified by the NLRB or at voluntary recognition, even when you reach, or if you reach an impasse at the table. So when employers come to us with givebacks or trade-offs on our units, we should just be telling them to go straight to hell. That's it. Knowing that we have the strength of the law behind us, and obviously the strength of our membership if we need to strike over this issue. But it's really important for us to recognize what it is. It's not a technical issue. These are employer attempts to break unions and reassert their dominance despite their inability to beat back organizing drives. I know it's been a problem for student workers and postdocs at Columbia to protect their unit from exclusion or misclassification or reclassification. And I've also had direct experience with this issue. HCSU has been fighting exclusion and classification grievances ever since our first contract in 2020. And so far, we've been successful in fighting against them because the employer has nothing to stand on. The NLRB unit clauses is very clear, like who is in and who isn't in the unit. So on the one hand, we absolutely need to be fighting back against employer tactics to divide workers. And I think you can do so through really tough bargaining and really clear demands on what we're bargaining over and strikes for full recognition. And then once you have your contract, you grieve those exclusions, and if necessary, you go to the NLRB. But we have to be thinking much deeper, I think, about this issue, because it's not just, again, like I said, a technical bargaining issue. At universities such as this one, as Columbia, you can look to NYU as an example of what happens next after you've successfully organized, which is that the university will creating new classes of workers, non-union workers, to redirect labor and undercut the power of the union. So we need to be having strategies that are organizing all workers wall to wall, and then building upon the knowledge that you built in those campaigns. Thank you.
Beverley.
Hi, thanks. Yeah, I mean, I agree with a lot of what you said, Brandon, for sure. I mean, I think that ultimately the real solution to ending trade-offs, exclusions of certain workers, and limits on worker protections, misclassifications, and reclassifications, as we know employers will do over and over and over, is strong membership mobilization and engagement throughout the life of the contract. An active and vocal membership is critical during the bargaining process, strong enforcement strategies during the life of the contract, and helping many groups of workers as possible organize at the same employer in order to build power so we don't have to make these choices. Employers are masterful at trying to find ways to limit our rights and cut people out of the benefits of the contract. We all know that. Developing strong and vibrant contract campaigns that combine collective worker action with multiple strategies have proven to be highly effective for workers in our region. Tactics we have employed include building pressure on the employer from outside sources that matter to them, politicians, community groups, other groups of workers, funders, media, etc. Direct actions like sit-ins, mobilizing to disrupt important campus events, identifying important people coming onto campus to take a public position supporting workers, worker whiteboard campaigns where worker stories highlight a bargaining demand, and much, much more. Thank you.
Okay, Brandon, you have 1 minute.
Yeah, so I think we're only going to be able to do all these things, these fight back strategies, if we're actively creating organizing committees and organizing spaces that bring the different workers at a single university together, right? This doesn't happen often. This forum right now, bringing together the different workers at Columbia University, that's going to be key. Because if the postdocs don't know what's happening to the adjuncts, who don't know what's happening to the student workers, who don't know what's happening to the other faculty, then that's the mess. That's the mess you've created. And then 5 years later, you catch the fact that the entire teaching force has been adjunctified, and you don't know what to do next. Well, I guess you set up an organizing committee with the adjuncts, but by that point, you're too far behind. And I think that's the issue, right? And then our campaigns stall, our campaigns, and then our contracts lose the power that they have behind them, even if there are great wins within them, because there's less people that they actually cover, less people that they actually mean anything to.
Thank you. Beverley, you have 1 minute.
Yeah, I mean, I think there absolutely is more power in units of workers across a certain employer and across certain sectors having communication, having the opportunity to develop strategy and have discussions and come up with ways to be stronger and to build more power and to win. I agree with that. All of our organizing campaigns in the region have organizing committees of workers. There could be much more done, I think, to allow for cross communication amongst those groups. And I, as a regional director, believe that's part of my job to create that space to have that happen. And I think it sort of organically does happen sometimes. And I think I could do better creating the space to have that happen. So I don't disagree with what Brandon is saying, but I think we've won some very strong contracts here in this region, the way we've been doing it also.
Thank you, Tom. Brandon, you have 1 minute?
Yeah, I think the transition I think the key to what you said was it happens organically. And of course, part of empowering members is to allow things to happen organically, but that's not the only way things should happen. I think things there should be structures in place. There should be decision-making processes and committees that are allowing these things to happen as a way we do business, not as a way to get around the fact that it isn't happening because our staff organizer either can't do it or hasn't thought to do it or doesn't want to do it. And I think that's the problem that we're pointing to here. We have enough density in certain workplaces to be able to do this together. And there's also no reason why. We want to build a Columbia University, for example, in which everyone automatically thinks, oh, I want to organize a new group of people. We're going to the UAW because there's like 3 UAW locals here. They're going to help us out and not have to look elsewhere. And I think that's what's lacking right now, is this real sense that we're building towards a unified project at a workplace.
Thank you. And Beverly, you have 1 minute?
Yeah, sure. So it's very rare that a staff person assigned or working on a particular project of an organizing committee, whether it's a CAP committee, a veterans, a women's, an organizing, whatever it is, that a meeting wouldn't happen for that reason. My experience, and I actually look forward to working with you, Brandon, whatever the end result of this election is that, it's a struggle to, members are very busy, workers are very busy, and they're doing jobs. And so creating the space is just the first part of really building the collective power to do that work together. And I would welcome the help to try and do that. I think it's critically important and something I really would like us all to be doing a lot better. But it is rarely that a staff person isn't available to do it. We have created spaces across all of our sectors and in many different ways over the years, for sure.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on to the next question then. And Beverley Brakeman will respond first, and Brandon Mancilla will respond second to this question. Are you in favor of the inclusion of a no strike, no lockout clause in collective bargaining agreements? Under which circumstances do you believe workers should violate it? And what steps will you take to empower workers across the region to bargain contracts that no longer include a no strike, no lockout clause? What is a worker's most effective weapon against the boss when they can't legally withhold their labor? Beverly?
Thank you, Barbara. Am I off mute? Let's see. Yeah.
You're good. Go ahead.
Yep. I'm in favor of agreements that are enforceable. That's why workers want contracts to improve and sustain economic security, health and safety, and other non-economic benefits like workplace discrimination. Historically, union contracts have traded the right to strike during the contract for neutral third-party binding arbitration. This process has helped many workers enforce rights won in their contract without having to strike over every grievance to enforce the contract. That said, the grievance and arbitration process and collective action are not mutually exclusive. Sorry. In a perfect world, we would have both mechanisms, actually, but this is a very rare that we have that. And I'm not opposed to having both, but it has been difficult. And most workers I work with in Region 9A, arbitration to enforce grievances versus striking over every issue is what they're more inclined towards, and what they believe will win them their rights. To violate a no strike clause is a worker's decision. As regional director, I would not be in a position to recommend to workers that they violate a no strike clause, given the impact that could have on them as workers and their families. However, I understand that workers will make these decisions, and it is my job to do the best I can to protect workers who do violate this provision. In my experience, there are many ways workers can disrupt the workplace, pressure the employer, and engage in direct action to fight the boss. Work slowdowns, direct action, political pressure, and more. In essence, building more power.
Thank you. And Brandon, you have 2 minutes.
Yeah, there's a saying in the labor movement, there are no illegal strikes, only ineffective ones. For those of you who remember, in New York City in 2005, the transit workers went on strike, even though there's a public law against public sector strikes in the city. So they took on management no matter the risk. So in terms of, violating the no strike clause, there are times that it's necessary, health and safety situations, gross violations of the contract and abuse of power by the boss or supervisors, political or social crises in which the withdrawal of our labor power has strong direct impact. All of these I think are justifiable moments in which the no strike clause is violated. And of course, it's the decision of the membership. Not too long ago at ALA, we saw multiple ALA shops and members stage walkouts, which were effective wildcat strikes against the presence of ICE in the courts. And I think members need to know that in these circumstances, their regional director in the UAW is going to have their back, not just, formally tell them they can't do this, and then even worse, try to shut them down. That's the spirit that should inform our work, and I will not stand in the way of workers who are justifiably taking that risk and that step to achieve justice in their workplaces or in their society. The labor movement as a whole needs to re-examine our commitment to the no strike clause, which was not always the case even in the UAW. But we also need to be realistic about the current moment in the movement and our inability to win contracts that no longer have the no strike clause in it. And such an effort will have to be something that we do across unions, and we need major labor law reform and new right to strike protections. And obviously we need to win the right to strike in states like Massachusetts and New York that don't have public sector laws that protect strikes. So there are things we can do though in the meantime. There are notable like legacy contracts, such as the one at UPS, which allows grievance strikes. We can bargain for no strike clauses that allow for health and safety strikes, that protect the right to picket and protest. And we can also fight back against management rights. That's an overlooked part of this.
Okay, thank you. Beverley, you have 1 minute?
Yeah, I think there absolutely are times, very important times, when workers do and should violate no strike night clauses. And that has been done very effectively. And I understand that, and it would be my job to do whatever I can to protect. I think what I said was I couldn't, in my position as a fiduciary for our institution and our $850 million strike fund, I couldn't recommend that, but I didn't say I wouldn't support it. And I didn't say that sometimes I would understand that has to happen, particularly I think around health and safety. We've seen teachers walk out, and we've seen workers do this on many occasions. And I actually do think that labor law in our country does need to be revisited, and that there are changes to be made. And I would welcome being part of those kinds of discussions.
Thank you, Brandon. You have 1 minute?
Yeah, I think, the labor movement was built by people who took risks, right? People like Walter Reuffer, people who knew that the law wasn't on their side, and by their action ended up creating more progressive laws that actually protected things like the right to strike, the right to organize, etc. That is the kind of action that we need to be taking today, because we're back in a situation in which the inequality in this country is ridiculous. Power is in the hands of few. We have a climate crisis. We have numerous, structural and racial inequalities and gender-based inequalities in this country. the rediscovery of labor and the withdrawal of our labor as a tactic within that and a strategy to fight back against this is absolutely key. And I don't think we can just simply expect, those issues to line up with when our contract expires. So I think that's the kind of thinking we need in the labor movement today.
Thank you. Beverly, you have 1 minute.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. I think that there are many, many ways. I think what's most important and sort of what we're both talking about, and it's worth much longer discussions, is building worker power and encouraging member mobilization and creating more inclusive spaces to have the kinds of discussions where we can build more collective power and political power as a movement and as workers. And that is something that our movement is built on. And I think in recent years has gotten away from. And part of what we're about in Region 9A is doing exactly that and doing it in organizing and bargaining and building our political power. And it's absolutely what I believe to be the path forward for our movement to continue to be powerful, institutionally powerful against corporate greed.
Brandon, you have 1 minute.
Yeah, I mean, I've said this in the other forum, but I think workers, especially in New York, are having a hard time believing building worker power because of two reasons. The rollback of the $500 that was won at the convention and then essentially voted down by the delegates. But of course, it took a lot of administration caucus arm wrestling to get the delegates to vote to bring it back down to $400 a week. And then the recent, president's meetings, debates amongst the membership about what to do about this unemployment insurance that we can't collect in New York anymore because of different, bureaucratic rules within the UAW about how we are supposed to collect strike duty and that conflicting with unemployment insurance. So we're leaving a lot of money on the table. $500 in UAW strike pay is now $400, $904. We can combine that with unemployment insurance. And, I think that's really hurting our right to strike, even in protected strikes. So I think that needs to be said.
Okay, thank you. Move on to the next question now. And Brandon Mancilla will respond first and Beverley Brakeman will respond second. How do we transform the UAW from a business union that co-manages workers with the boss through the grievance and arbitration procedure back into a fighting union that encourages and empowers workers to take direct action through militant labor strikes to win more than the status quo? What are the limitations of the grievance and arbitration procedure and labor management committees, both in their effectiveness and in their ability to build collective labor power? How can they be transformed into spaces where workers engage in direct class struggle? Brandon.
The class struggle approach to unionism, I think, when facing something like the grievance procedure, starts with the thinking that the grievance procedure isn't the end of militancy and struggle, even though in history, right, in terms of what that does against the right to strike, obviously it isn't there to stand in for that. But we can make the grievance procedure and things like the labor management committee real sites of contestation and struggle and member engagement. So in order to do that, we need trainings and understanding at the regional level, at the UAW international level, that this is how we're going to use these grievances as opportunities to fight back and fight violations aggressively. And we also need to be learning from each other about the common forms of grievances we see across the different units within our industries. A militant union isn't just a union that goes on strike, but it's one that brings this approach into all of its different work, including contract enforcements. So the more you organize around grievances, the more active members will be. And if you treat grievances just as things that need to be quickly resolved or things that never get addressed at all in the worst case scenario, then of course you're going to enter a lull period in your union. One way to ensure that your grievances are met with an organizing approach rather than a servicing approach is to empower and train members themselves to handle them, such as what HGSU has done with its grievance committee. Don't just leave them all to your staff and top leaders to handle, and you should also have leaders and staff that are willing to work with members to train them and build up those skills. On labor management committees, I'll say what I usually tell delegates and stewards in trainings that I hold, that the LMC is a space where you go essentially to face management and tell them anything and flex your power. So bring in members into those meetings. There's no reason for it just to be a place where your president meets with the boss and becomes buddy buddy with them. It's actually a place where you can actually bring up things. And if it doesn't work, then you can still bring those fights into bargaining, because LMCs aren't supposed to work.
Thank you. Beverly.
Yeah, thank you. Well, first of all, I have to say that I don't agree with the premise of this question that UAW co-manages workers with the boss. I think if you asked many of our leaders or members in this region, they would find this premise of this question insulting. It is certainly not the way Region 9A approaches representation of workers. Access to binding arbitration by a neutral third party is one of the main reasons workers organize, so they have the ability to enforce rights and benefits gained in their contract. Contract enforcement is something that requires many tactics, as you suggest, Brandon. Grievance and arbitration is most often the first and most common tactic, but unions are strongest when workers are engaged, empowered, and mobilized to engage in collective action to fight the boss. Grievance and arbitration and direct action are not mutually exclusive. We don't have to choose one or the other. And I think you said that. Our union has a long history of fighting for workers' rights and taking direct action. We have had recognition strikes, representation strikes, work stoppages and slowdowns, direct action, majority actions like petitions, sign-ons, pressure from outside parties, and more to win and to enforce contracts. An area where we have had a lot of success in some of our higher ed contracts is the right to grieve and arbitrate over sexual harassment and discrimination. This has been a big reason many higher ed workers have wanted to organize a union, and something that all of us in this union should be very, very proud of, setting a standard in this sector.
Thank you. And Brandon, you have 1 minute.
Yeah, the question of, business unionism as opposed to, the struggle-oriented unionism, it's a big question. And I think, Region 9A is doing better on this question than most, but I still think we're in a service mentality of what we're supposed to be doing with grievances and with internal organizing. However, members of the Curry Solidarity team are within the business union mentality. Like, it is a business unionist move for Ray Curry to be on the board of like Mercedes-Benz, for example, which he was in the past. And I think that's the kind of cooperation with management that members want to see change going forward. We want to see union leadership that isn't sitting on boards of companies and organizations. And I would say even in 9A, like in this instance, like we need to have a different perspective on what organizing means beyond like a nonprofit mentality, which is one that is not mobilizing, but it's actually within this problem. So I think that's the kind of leadership we're looking for.
Time. Beverly.
Yeah, I'm not sure I really understand what Brandon was talking about with reference to the nonprofit thing, but I think I don't know if I have much of a rebuttal here. In terms of the business unionism and sitting on boards, really what our union is about, both in the region and in the international, is how we build power for workers. And so does sitting on a board necessarily mean you're co-managing or being co-opted? Not necessarily. I've sat on boards and been the biggest pain in the ass ever. I sit on this international executive board and often don't agree with things. So I don't necessarily agree with that premise, that business unionism, your premise around business unionism.
Brandon, you have 1 minute.
Yeah, well, if the history of the labor movement hadn't gone into this management cooperation model, we wouldn't be in the place we are in today. The companies have adjusted to changes within the global economy, and they've done so with the consent of the unions who haven't fought back hard enough. There's been differences, there's some exceptions to that, but we've seen 40 years of union retreat and loss of membership. And if we continue with this path of thinking that we can make the change from within, and change from within, by the way, here, not within union leadership, change from within the company, right? By sitting on boards. That's a real issue if we think that our union leaders, if that's the priority or one of the priorities or one of the strategies that our union leaders are taking on. I think we need to be fighting with the companies. The question of like our political like allegiances and the ways we struggle and the electoral or advocacy field is a different question, but within the company, the company should know that we are not their friend. And I think that's what this business union question is getting to.
Beverley.
I guess I don't really have, in our region, we have been helping more and more workers organize, including through strikes. And I don't necessarily think that, I don't necessarily agree with the premise that we should always be at war with companies. We should always be fighting them for better benefits, for better health care, and for improved conditions for workers. And the best way to do that is to continue to build power and in lots of different ways and in lots of creative ways.
Okay, thank you. We're going to move on then to the next question. Beverley Brakeman will respond first, and Brandon Mancilla will respond second. What do you see as the purpose of building a caucus within the union? Are you currently a member of, or have you historically been affiliated with, any UAW caucus? If so, which one? And why are you a member of, or why were you affiliated with that caucus? Please include in your response if you attended meetings of any caucus during the 2022 UAW Constitutional Convention over the summer. Beverley.
Yeah, thank you. Caucuses exist for people to come together around a vision. Our caucus is called Working Together for Justice in Region 9A because that's what we stand for. Historically, the Region 9A caucus has been aligned with the administration caucus, but we created the Working Together for Justice caucus as a space to discuss a vision and focus that is unique to our region. I'm on the Curry Solidarity team and remain affiliated with the Curry Solidarity team or the administration caucus because we are a group that took on the corruption. Those members who violated our trust and our vision are no longer in our caucus or even this union. Yes, I attended administration caucus meetings at the convention. I did not, however, attend multiple caucuses and was very transparent with 9A members throughout the entire convention as to what were the positions of the administration caucus to the best of my ability. As part of this caucus, we have not only run out corrupt leaders, but we have done things like created new policies and compliance measures and independent ethics advisory person and a member ethics advisory council. And we've done many things to address the corruption and change the course of this institution. And is there a lot more to do? Yes, there is a lot more to do. And it's really a very, very sad chapter in our history. But I'm proud to be part of the reform and the change that needs to happen in this union and that will continue to happen.
Thank you. Brandon, you have 2 minutes.
I think caucuses are important to democratic life in a union. I am against the administration caucus and its one-party rule over the union over 6 to 7 decades, but I don't think caucuses by themselves are the problem, especially when they're based in membership democracy or other forms of member identification with one another for the purpose of building solidarity and organizing around a shared vision. I am a member of a caucus. I'm a member of UAWD, Unite All Workers for Democracy. This caucus has been instrumental in pushing for reform and one member, one vote. And I also think, importantly, UAWD has connected members from various sectors and industries and regions to work together and collaborate towards a shared vision for democracy and a renewed militant UAW. I remain a member of the caucus of UAWD because outside from my own local, I have never been in a space, an intergenerational, cross-sector, cross-regional space as powerful as that one. During the convention, though I was a guest and not a delegate of the convention, caucus meetings with UAWD were crucial to define our strategy and assist reform-minded delegates meeting each other for the first time. And we can really thank the organizing of reform-minded delegates on the floor for passing an increase in strike pay, which was then reversed the next day because of the arm twisting that I was talking about earlier. When we're isolated in our units or locals from one another, these forms of solidarity are very hard to build. And I think caucuses are really important to building a different kind of culture. So under my leadership, if I were to be elected, caucus formation would be encouraged rather than repressed. And I'm looking forward to working with members who would want to even draft policy on how to have internally robust or democratic caucuses.
Thank you. Beverly, you have 1 minute.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, as I said, caucuses, I agree with Brandon that caucuses can be a very vital part of any union. And I've been clear that what Working Together for Justice stands for. We've been successful on these matters and look forward to continuing to be a strong caucus within the region. And the administration caucus, like Brandon's caucus, has a vision and has a focus and has historically done very many good things for this region. There are members of the administration caucus who are ones that have supported me and us in securing the resources for organizing, for example, who have been behind the electric vehicle strategy for raising the standards for all auto workers. So, every caucus has a very important role to play. And sometimes there are bad people in caucuses, as we've talked about.
Thank you. Brandon, you have 1 minute.
I think it's really important to differentiate the UAW International and especially the executive board from the administration caucus in this way. The UAW International should be leading an EV strategy for organizing in a just transition. The UAW International should be making ethics reforms and making the changes necessary to democratize the union and strengthen the union. It's the UAW International that should be supporting organizing and sending resources to the different regions for the different projects and campaigns. It's not the administration caucus, and that's the problem. Currently, the administration caucus is seen as exactly the same thing as the IAB because it is. Right now, the admin caucus controls all the positions, controls all the regions, and it controls, even local leadership at this point. And I think that's what this movement is about. It's a challenge to that one party rule because that needs to change. We can't have a union in which one caucus claims all hegemony over the entire structure of the union. That's anti-democratic.
Beverly, do you have 1 minute?
Yeah, I mean, currently the UAW International Union has 13 international executive board members whose job is to set direction and set priorities, and that is what we are doing and what we have been doing, and they aren't all the same thing. If I mean, that's what leaders do. That's what, they set direction and they look at the priorities that are going to build power for members across different sectors. And that's what the people of in this administration caucus are doing. And at least that's not happening at the absence of member input and member engagement. So I'm not sure I quite understand the point that you're trying to make, because we are, whether we're administration caucus or any other caucus, we are the people elected in 2018 to set these kinds of directions, and I'm proud of them.
And Brandon, you have 1 minute.
The point I'm trying to make is that you credited the administration caucus for those things when it should be the job of the International Executive Board members. But right now, they are one of the same because the caucus controls all the major institutions and bodies and leadership positions within the UAW. And that's the problem, right? That's what leads the Curry Solidarity team to say things like, there are outsiders trying to change our union. When we're talking about the very members who have for the first time been empowered to run in these direct elections, or delegates who came to the convention with different ideas and wanted to join up with other reform-minded delegates, that it's very easy to craft a narrative that we are the union and those outsiders want to destroy the union when one caucus controls everything. And that's not the way it should be. It should be very clear what the job of the union is and the different ways and different caucuses or different teams available to run for those positions. And it shouldn't be defined. UAW should not equal administration caucus from now on.
Okay, thank you. We're going to move on to the next question now. And Brandon Mancilla will respond first, and Beverley Brakeman will respond second to this question. In Brandon Mancilla's campaign platform, he is calling for a rank-and-file organizing committee for the region. What is your position on establishing a body in which rank-and-file members can take an active role in determining the nature of regional organizing campaigns? How do you think such a body should be structured? Brandon?
Yeah, so I believe the best organizing strategies come from the membership because I've seen it in action, and I constantly see it in action as an organizer to this day. So this organizing committee idea that I'm proposing is a way to bring decisions over organizing to all of us, empower organizing, both external organizing and internal organizing. So members are informed of what's happening and are also able to show up and participate and take part in those decisions. Right now, that's not very transparent. It's not very clear. And also, like I've said before, it's discouraged. So if we're going to take on, let's say, for example, a Columbia as a workplace, all workers of Columbia, all UAW members at Columbia strategy for fighting back against this employer. And if your contracts are lining up, that's something that this organizing committee or, a committee focused on Columbia organizing would do. That doesn't currently exist right now. So the idea I'm proposing is to beat back this frustration we have that members are discouraged from actually being able to converse with one another and build power to get together. The fact that you're not doing that and haven't done that up until this point at Columbia is a shame because it's a lot of wasted potential. So the committee would be a way for members of the region to have direct access, not only to the director, but to each other and discuss key organizing, bargaining, and strike strategies. And through that, we'll be able to sort of also develop the different priorities that we have at the regional level. It shouldn't just be a regional director in conversation with some local leaders or with some staff about where we're going, where we're headed, and what campaigns are worth waging and whatnot. Like it should be coming from what we currently have right now, because there's a lot of knowledge and a lot of talent and a lot of know-how within our membership, and an organizing committee will be the first step in actually moving us past this current inertia that I'm talking about.
Thank you. Beverley.
Thanks. I agree. There is tremendous energy and passion in our membership. Rank and file participation in organizing is one of the things that has made our region one of the leading regions on organizing. I support members participating actively in our organizing and consider workers to be the experts as to what and how to build power and organize their union. How exactly that should best look is a discussion I would like to have and I believe is very important. Obviously, the most important thing to successful organizing of the unorganized is helping workers build a strong worker organizing committee. We have a strong track record in this region, part of which comes from enabling workers from recently organized shops to share their experience and help strengthen the commitment of new organizing committees to effective methods. Rank and file workers, especially from recently organized shops, have played a critical role helping other similar groups of workers get campaigns started and oriented toward effective methods to organize successfully against employer opposition. For example, in the large wave of higher ed organizing that happened in our region between 2013 and 18, NYU workers who successfully organized met with grad workers from UConn, Columbia, and the New School in early 2014 to share their experiences and offer advice on best practices, which helped propel those campaigns towards successful paths. Similarly, former grad workers at Columbia played a key role in organizing the postdoc union at Columbia. Former grad workers at UConn also helped organize postdoc union there. Rank and file members have also played a key role in museum and auto tech organizing. Outside of higher education, we have also engaged local union leaders in making proposals for strategic organizing campaign resources in museum, auto tech, and legal services. Our manufacturing roundtable is another example where leaders and members have been coming together, trying to identify strategic organizing opportunities in the region.
Thank you. Brandon, you have 1 minute?
I think what you pointed out in some of the examples you gave is, I think, what we need to start getting away from, which is just a few key people who have all the knowledge and monopolize it of the different organizing drives happening, towards an engagement with these different OCs with each other, and in a way that doesn't discourage some of the more some of the more heterodox ideas that some of the committees are coming up with. And I think that's what this OC is trying to get across. It's trying to change the culture of a few staff that are able to carry out campaigns, because obviously staff are important, but actually putting the power of these strategic thinking and these organizing challenges in the hands of the members themselves, because the members are going to be the best organizers. That's the change we want to see. And in order to get to a sectoral strategy, it's going to take more than just a few staff who have some experience. It's going to take the membership coming together to carry out that strategy.
Time. Thank you. Beverly, you have 1 minute?
Yeah, what you're describing is not my experience of how we organize in this region. In fact, the members are the experts, and the members do make the decisions, and the staff are there to help provide resources and guidance. And yeah, they are important, but for the most part, the staff are not the experts on what's going on at the place of work and what is needed and why the members want to have a union in the first place. So organizing committees in shops are vitally important. Organizing committees across sectors and across employers, talking to each other. I think that's a very good idea. And I think it actually happens in our region, and I wouldn't be opposed to that, and I would be very open to creating the space for that to happen more, so that we can build sectoral power across employers.
Thank you. Brandon, you have 1 minute?
Yeah, so I think this just shows the power of democracy and what was so important to pass one member, one vote. Because I was in the trenches in these battles within these organizing campaigns, and the word sector strategy was never once mentioned, right? Whenever we asked about the UMass Geo contract or the GSOC contract or what's going on at Columbia, people were immediately trying to tell us to like not ask those questions. Don't worry about it. Focus on your thing here. When from the beginning we should have been working together. And I think that's the difference, right? This OC is trying to get past that, so that whatever personality conflicts exist, whatever kind of issues exist structurally within our staffing and the way the allocation happens, we're going to break through that by actually bringing people together. And I'll just say that I had the experience of a very active organizing committee, because our organizing committee pushed through and try to do things the way we wanted to do them. And I know the student workers of Columbia can also say the same thing, and the postdocs as well. It takes that effort to build our power.
I can't think of a single time, Brandon, when you actually came to me and asked that question. So I'm not really sure what you're talking about. And but that's not to disagree that members across organizing committees talking to each other is very important. Could I be doing a better job of creating those opportunities? Yeah, but when we did do that in 2020 and in 2021, based on requests from higher ed and coming off of the immigration struggles under Trump, we held forums for our higher ed locals to get together, and they were very well participated in for a while, and then people got too busy. So I'm all about creating the space and allowing that to happen. And I beg to differ on the question about talking about sectors. I don't believe you were in every conversation that we ever had about organizing. Perhaps it wasn't brought up at Harvard, but certainly it is something we're the unions with the most academic members.
Time. Okay, going to move on to the next question. And Beverley Brakeman will respond first, and Brandon Mancilla will respond second. The question is, what role do you believe the labor movement has in ending capitalism? And over what concrete issues must workers withhold their labor to accomplish this? In which ways do you believe capitalism benefits the working class? Beverley?
Great. Thank you, Barbara. So in my opinion, I don't believe the majority of workers in our region believe the role of our union is to end capitalism. That said, I don't think capitalism benefits the working class. This is why unions are so important. I do believe that most workers believe that corporate greed, the 1% mentality upon which our capitalist society operates and thrives, and fighting against the ways in which workers are co-opted and victimized in that system is a key role unions can and do play by establishing a more level, fair playing field for all workers. Unions' role are to help workers ensure they get fair pay and benefits, a safe work environment, access to dispute resolution processes that are fair and equitable, and recognition of their contributions to the success of their employer. Federal labor law was originally designed to create a more even playing field between workers and their employers within our capitalist system, thereby giving workers a legally protected right to organize and engage in collective action. As for what workers should withhold their labor to accomplish change, those are decisions best made by workers collectively and in solidarity with each other.
Okay, Brandon, you have 2 minutes. Go ahead.
Thank you. Capitalism is the system that dominates us today. It's what keeps us from having high quality free healthcare. It traps us in debt, limits our chances at a dignified retirement. It predetermines what the quality of the water and the air are in the neighborhoods or zip codes that we grow up in. And it's a system that concentrates capital and power in the hands of a small percentage of the population and impoverishes everyone else. Historically, the labor movement has been one of the few weapons we've had as workers to fight back, to end child labor, establish the working day and the weekend, health and safety regulations, and ensure a decent living for working people. So when we talk about reforming the UAW and building a fighting democratic union, we're also talking about rebuilding one of the most important unions within the labor movement as a whole that can confront capital once again. Specifically here in the forum host, universities are key sites of both the production of knowledge and elites, but they're also engines of extraction from communities through their land holding, their investment portfolios, and the rent they collect. So Columbia University is a corporation and a landlord. It's not a university. And the labor movement here has to understand how central you all are as workers to the mission of that university to reproduce that power. So in a more general scope, I think we're miles away from the labor movement being able to take on an entire economic system and replace it. But change can happen fast, and we don't have that much time left with the climate crisis. So we need to be boosting the most ambitious visions for how to build our struggles over the production of a green economy, transition out of fossil fuels, disruption of logistics, and a strong UAW in coordination with other unions and other international unions and local unions in New York City, for example, is going to be crucial for that. The time that capitalism benefited the working class was really short in a post-war period. And that was at the height of the labor movement's power. So in order to fight for a future, we can't romanticize that past, but realize that the labor movement's going to have to be bolder than just a co-manager of capital.
Time. Thank you. Beverly, you have 1 minute.
Yeah, thank you. I'm not a labor historian. However, I think we're saying some of the same things, Brandon, in that what unions are is an incredibly effective and powerful tool for taking on the ways in which capitalism hurts workers, hurts the environment, hurts communities, hurts families, hurts children, hurts working people. And unions have lost a lot of power over the years, and we do need new mechanisms. We need new energy. We need new ways to mobilize and engage rank and file members so that we can build that power back and continue to be, or start, to be an even stronger influence, because that is how we're going to really make change. And on the climate justice issue, this is why we're part of giant climate justice coalitions. It's very, very important that we build our power back up again.
Thank you. Brandon?
Yeah, the question of how capitalism works isn't some abstract question that doesn't have any relevance to UAW members. And to expand the question beyond Region 9A's members for just a second, the question of losing pensions, introducing tiers, speeding up the production process, and then therefore losing, thousands and hundreds of thousands of jobs in the auto sector and manufacturing sector. That's a question of how this global economy operates and who makes those decisions. And frankly, the UAW, during the administration caucuses rule, has not had a strategy to fight back against that. Obviously, one union can't change the entire fate of a global economy, but it has a huge influence, especially a strong union like the UAW with massive sectoral power at that point to have had a better way to fight back. And, you always say, the concessions were a compromise to save jobs. We lost the jobs anyway. Those jobs left this country anyway. Those plants were closed. That's a problem of capitalism and unions not understanding how to fight back.
Time. Beverly.
You've talked a lot about no concessions and no tiers and no corruption in your platform. And I don't know anybody in our union who wouldn't agree with all of those things. And unfortunately, one of the really, sort of sad, I guess, parts of our capitalist society is that sometimes those really hard decisions have to be made because the capitalist society is built on offshoring labor and outsourcing labor and moving production away from this country. So there are times when union members have to make those really, really hard decisions so that they have a job. Or they have a place to make a living for their family. But I agree with you that unions need to grow their power so that we can be a more effective tool against capitalism, because it is killing workers.
Time. Thank you. Brandon.
So a key part going forward, if whatever leadership gets elected this fall truly believes in tackling these problems and reversing these concessions and building a greener, green union jobs and, protecting jobs in the auto sector during that transition. A key part of that is going to be an international vision, right? We do have a choice, right? The companies think globally. You're right that they've just offshored jobs. You're right that they shut down plants and they go elsewhere. But I also think that's also been exaggerated, though, because a lot of the work has gone to the South, right? And a lot of that work is non-unionized, and there needs to be an organizing strategy that absolutely battles back against that, in conjunction with a global strategy linking up with unions abroad, because this isn't going to be fought simply by part of not romanticizing the 40s and 50s is not just thinking that we're going to build a nice collectively bargained country and at the expense of the rest of the world. We're going to have to be working with partners across the globe, especially where UAW jobs have met up.
Time. Thank you. We'll move on to the next question then. Brandon Mancilla will respond first, and Beverley Brakeman will respond second. Now, as much as ever, the working class is experiencing detrimental effects of minoritarian rule in our politics, corporate donors' influence, anti-democratic institutions like the Supreme Court, and often violent oppression of working class resistance all prevent popular policies from being implemented. What role do you believe unions have in political struggles, particularly those for queer, feminist, Black, and Indigenous liberation, and the movements for housing, healthcare, and immigrant justice? In what ways does this role differ from the current model of UAW unionism, and how do we get there? Brandon.
Thank you. I think labor unions are key spaces to struggle for liberation. In the UAW, we talk about politics, I think almost at this point exclusively through our relationship to electoral advocacy and legislative advocacy and the Democratic Party, which I think is limiting. And I think we need to be pushing beyond that. Not that legislative advocacy and electoral politics aren't important, they're absolutely crucial, but we should be demanding better of our politicians and not just expecting that through nice relationships we're able to win some limited favor. I believe, for instance, our CAP needs to be more than just a lobbying and endorsement arm, but also a space where we're setting clear goals for what an independent labor political agenda looks like, and who are the best candidates and what are the best campaigns that we can be putting our weight and resources and our members behind. And that starts with listening to members themselves in specific struggles. So struggles for queer, feminist, Black, and Indigenous liberation, or our movements for housing, healthcare, and immigrant justice, will take also establishing relationships with social movement orgs in housing, for example, with the tenant unions. This means opening up our union halls and spaces to groups that we can build coalitions with, not just to learn from and become educated on issues, but actually build a political and social coalition with, inviting people into organizing, in other words, not just educational enrichment. In our existing union, I think we can take the lead from unions that have engaged in bargaining for the common good, meaning expanding our demands at the table beyond our narrow interests as workers to include demands that will bring justice and resources to our communities as a whole. We can think creatively there, how every local or how every unit decides to do such a thing if they want to. That's something that is up to the membership. But again, the question has to be put on the table through the different spaces we create, different organizing committees that we create. And we have examples. I've talked about the ICE strikes at ALA, for example. Okay. That's beyond just the workers.
Time. Thank you. Beverley.
Thank you. Members, leaders, and the UAW as an institution have a long history of taking on social and economic justice and political struggles that address the kinds of inequality raised in this question. It is and has been a key goal and function of our union throughout history to engage in struggle, and one that many workers have used when choosing to join our union. Some historical examples include being the main sponsor of one of the first Earth Days, our engagement in the South African divestment campaign and support for Nelson Mandela, our participation in the civil rights movement as a key ally. More recently, our members have engaged in political struggles like opposing the Muslim travel ban, protecting international student rights during the Trump era, participating in Black Lives Matter and supporting Black Lives Matter events and organizations, and speaking out on the Dobbs decision. When it comes to bargaining for the common good, it may not have always been called this, but this is something that we've been doing for a long time in Region 9A. Some examples of that include years and years ago with the Columbia support staff. The initial support staff organizing and bargaining at Columbia helped expand the universe of bargaining topics by winning groundbreaking provisions that address significant racial and gender pay inequality and some of the first union negotiated childcare subsidies ever. Academic worker discrimination and harassment protections. I would also say that all the work we have done campaigning and winning survivor-centered protections against sexual and other forms of harassment for grad student workers, international worker protections. We led one of the largest Muslim ban rally in 2017. The work preserving the Columbia NLRB decision through the Trump years. We worked with other unions and members to preserve that decision at a very, very precarious time in our in our country's history, so that thousands of graduate student workers could still have the right to organize.
Thank you. Brandon, you have 1 minute?
I think the struggle for, you know, issues that are usually called non-economic within higher ed specifically, but definitely in other spaces is definitely, an example of the kinds of issues that members have brought up. But, I will say that this is an issue that the difference between saying this has been an issue on the agenda for our unions versus what's actually happened in our processes is really important. For example, the 2018 framework agreement that you reached with Columbia University took away the right to strike, which hampered the ability for the union to win many of the different contract demands that the membership wanted, including a lot of these non-economic demands. That ended up affecting our HCSU's ability to organize around these issues. And just down the line, we continue to go. I think that's the difference here between, I think, having a broader strategy that incorporates these issues than just saying we're doing things about them.
Thank you. Beverly, you have 1 minute?
I think to go back to what I said, I think we have done a lot of the things that you're talking about in terms of bringing coalitions of workers and members and other unions together to fight on much broader issues that aren't just what is happening in the workplace, but that are happening in society that need to be addressed and changed. And those are the things that we're not just talking about, we're actually doing and have been doing for a very long time in our region.
Brandon, you have 1 more minute.
Yeah. Do you have any thoughts on the framework agreement now, 4 years later, just thinking about that point in time? I'm telling you, that's serious. It's the reason why I think our sector in particular has had, is calling for reform is because we've seen how putting trust in the international to deliver for us is not leading to the contracts we want and the campaigns we want. And I think the hesitancy also comes from knowing that as we are continuing to build power within this sector specifically, which is hosting this forum, we're going to need leadership that isn't just going to come to disagreements behind our back and actually empower us to take on bigger challenges. Like I've said, these universities, Columbia University specifically, is a landlord and an employer, right? It's a big player in the New York economy. We want strategies that are able to fight back against that and improve the lives of our members. And we need regional directors that aren't going to essentially encourage deals that limit that power.
Okay. Thank you. Time. Beverly, you have 1 minute.
Yeah. I mean, look, for 18 years, Columbia refused to recognize and to bargain with us. And we chose not to file a ULP as a legalistic strategy. And when I decided to enter into the negotiations around the framework agreement, I would do things differently now, but I would still do it because it got us to the bargaining table after 18 years of not being recognized and not being able to negotiate a contract. But would I do things differently now with more experience? Yes. Do I think it was a good idea to go behind closed doors and do something like that? No, I don't. But members voted on it. It was passed and we went forward and ultimately we have a contract.
Thank you. We have 1 more question and we'll hear the candidate's response to this question, and then we'll have closing remarks. So Beverley Brakeman will respond first to this question, and Brandon Mancilla will respond second. During the pandemic, Columbia University's endowment increased by $3.1 billion in the fiscal year 2021, reaching $14.35 billion. Yet, after 9 months of bargaining with the Columbia support staff, UAW Local 2110, the university imposed a final offer of 3% annual increases to base salaries for the duration of the 3-year contract, well below the current rate of inflation. Additionally, roughly 20% of workers will lose access to their current premium-free healthcare plan in January 2025, 1 month before the contract expires. Do you believe workers deserve more than what they got with this contract that was negotiated in closed-door meetings between the Union Bargaining Committee and Columbia University management? Why or why not? What do you think could have been done to change this outcome? And if elected, what will you do to ensure that workers are no longer strongly encouraged by local union leadership to ratify a contract with effective pay cuts and healthcare givebacks? Beverly?
Thank you, Barbara. Well, first of all, I always believe workers deserve more and should have more. As regional director, my job is to support, secure resources, and provide needed assistance to local unions bargaining and enforcing contracts and organizing new units of workers. In this case, while I understand some members are not happy with this contract, the TA, or the tentative agreement, was recommended by Columbia's bargaining committee and subsequently ratified by a majority of the bargaining unit. That was done that's democracy right there. Our region and its local unions have a long history of bargaining strong contracts because we know that building worker power, mobilization, and engagement is what will win the strongest contracts. I'm always committed to helping UAW members build power to win more every time we go to the bargaining table.
Brandon, you have 2 minutes.
It's I think the important thing to remember here is that winning strong contracts take strong bargaining campaigns. The way to avoid the situation in which, in a record year for Columbia earnings wise, you're facing givebacks and low wage raises offers, is to have a plan to fight back against that. So as regional director, because I would make bargaining a priority, I'd be in contact with local and union leaders and the rank and file to see how the campaign is going, if they're facing things such as pay cuts and givebacks, and seeing how we can work together and how we can support as a region to be able to mobilize any support and whatever it takes to be able to fight that strong campaign. But that takes the creation of the space for members to actually be able to fight that campaign. And I don't think that's what happened in this situation. I think we need to have a larger conversation about the process of pushing through ratification votes and developing democratic processes in which both bargaining and ratification votes aren't just assumed as like positive things. We need to actually really consider like what we're facing when we're recommending or approving a contract as a bargaining committee. So I think there's different levels here, right? I don't think democracy is so simple as one group said this and everyone said this. It's about what happened in the middle, what happened throughout the process that led to that outcome. So, and again, I'll say this again, I'll sound like a broken record, but I think we can achieve this by learning from each other. There's plenty of units and locals within this region that have faced really tough negotiations and have come out with great contracts, others with not so great contracts, but have had a real fight for what they ended up with, and also places where a ratification vote was really contested, and that's a good thing. Contested ratification votes are not a bad thing.
Beverly, you have 1 minute.
Thanks. I think that you might be overestimating a little bit my role as a regional director, Brandon. I wasn't at the table. Was I in touch with the local? Yes, of course. Part of my job as a regional director is to make sure the local has the legal support, the resources that they need to bargain contracts. There was a member bargaining committee that was bargaining that contract. So it is not my role to go in and impose my power and authority on those negotiations. However, my commitment is to always to have workers have the opportunity to bargain the strongest contracts. But in order to do that, you need power. You need mobilized, engaged, active members to win the strongest contracts. And that is something that I am wholeheartedly support and always have and always will.
Thank you, Brandon. You have 1 minute.
I think if you don't try, it doesn't happen. If you don't try to mobilize membership, then it doesn't happen. And then it's a fait accompli. It's over. It's over before you even ask the question. So, of course, if you end up in a situation in which you don't have a plan for escalation or even a strike threat, if it even gets to that, then if you haven't started out with that vision of needing to know that that's your greatest strength, then that's what's going to end up happening. By no means by saying connecting workers with one another and the regional director having a more active participation and conversation with workers and bargaining committees about bargaining, that does not mean imposing a vision. It does not mean imposing a vision whatsoever. I do not believe a regional director should, I think we need to be getting away from a perspective in which a regional director goes into a room and tells you, that's it, we're done here. And I think, just to say, the one time you have said you've gotten involved in bargaining throughout this forum was a framework agreement, which you say you have reservations about now and doubts looking back. So that's not the kind of regional director I want to be. And I hope it's not the regional director you want to be going forward.
Time. Thank you. Beverly?
Yeah, I actually didn't even bring up the framework agreement as one of the bargaining things that I did. And I think it's hard for me to really understand where you're coming from a lot of times, Brandon, because on the one hand, you say regional director shouldn't come in and impose and have authority and make all these decisions, but you continue to ask or suggest that I should. So it's a little confusing for me to understand what exactly you believe the role of a regional director is and should be. What I can tell you is how I am a leader and a regional director is collaboratively, inclusively, creatively, and I surround myself with people who know more and know better and can help me make really difficult decisions. And most of those people are members and leaders who work and live in this union. That is how I lead as a regional director.
Thank you. Okay, thank you both very much. I've come to the end of our questions, and now each candidate will have 3 minutes for closing remarks. Those closing remarks are going to start with Beverley Brakeman, who will have 3 minutes, and then Brandon Mancilla will have 3 minutes. So, Beverley? Great.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you, Barbara, for taking your time this evening, and for all of the student workers, the Columbia support workers, and the postdocs for having this really engaging discussion and debate. I appreciate it. I'm proud to have helped support, include, and engage with workers in Region 9A. We have a strong historical track record of advancing justice, promoting positive change, and building power for workers in our region. We have done this through bargaining and enforcing strong contracts, leading the way on organizing the unorganized, using our collective voice for a progressive policy change, and grappling with the persistence of racial and other forms of systemic inequality. In the last 4 years, our leadership has also helped make the UAW at the international level more transparent and accountable. Region 9A is my highest priority, and my work is largely focused on and driven by our region's leaders and members. Yet I have served with integrity on our IEB, helping to advance significant reforms such as anti-nepotism, conflict of interest, and other important policies designed to increase leader accountability, financial and compliance measures, sexual harassment training, an independent ethics officer, and a member ethics advisory committee, and more. As a member of the IEB, I have successfully maintained my and our region's autonomy while securing the resources to grow and build. This has not always been easy, but with the support of IEB leaders, our members and leaders, we have established a principled, vocal, and respected seat at the table, and that will not change. Despite all of the challenges placed in our region's way by then President Gary Jones, I stood up and fought for our region and for our members and spoke vehemently alongside President Curry for the ousting of Jones and Pearson. When an IEB member was alleged to have sexually harassed female staff members, I spoke out. On social justice issue, I supported President Curry being one of the few industrial union leaders to put out a statement on reproductive justice. I have dedicated the last 18 years of my life to this union and to our members. I am grateful to so many who have built the foundation on which we fight. I know that if we figured out how to not just survive, but actually grow the last 4 years, we can only do better and we can only do more in the next 4 years. And I really hope to have your support. And thank you again for this evening.
Thank you, Beverly. Brandon, you have 3 minutes.
I think this election is our opportunity to rethink what we expect from our union leaders, from the International Executive Board and the regional director. The role of the regional director should be promoting the most powerful form of unionism, which is the unionism that we say we believe in, which is the membership as the highest authority, and meaning membership and decision-making comes from the bottom up. We have a serious issue in this region in which certain leaders have the ear of our leadership, and therefore what the membership of that local believe is discredited or goes unheard. I believe for the first time, we're having a necessary conversation about the future of this union and this region, and in this forum specifically, what the election means for all workers at Columbia University. Organizing isn't just about numbers and checking off a new so-called win. It's about making the deep transformative relationships that will be able to confront our employers, our supervisors, and the injustices and structural inequalities in our society. If our leaders stand in the way, then democracy means democracy that we've won as a membership through the one member, one vote referendum. It means that we as a membership have now the opportunity to elect new ones. As the Members United slate, headed by Sean Fain for president, Margaret Mock for secretary treasurer, Rich Boyer and Mike Boo for vice president, and me as a candidate for Region 9A director, we are going to stand with the membership for the many struggles that lay ahead. It's a crisis-ridden society. It's a time in which we're transitioning in our economy, in this stage of our pandemic we're facing. And it's going to take some bold leadership and leadership that's willing to work with all of the members, not just a select few. And that's the vision we present as Members United, a future in which the UAW is a proud, strong union again, but one that is actually rethinking how to build a labor movement going forward and not just romanticize what we once had, but pushing for what we can achieve in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Really, very big thank you to Brendan and Beverly for participating in this forum and really a robust and important discussion. So thank you so much. And again, thanks to the UAW members at Columbia University for hosting this forum. As I mentioned at the opening, this is the first election in the UAW in which members can vote directly, and this forum becomes especially important in that context. So thank you all for participating. Just a few notes before we close out the evening. The voting is by paper ballot. In order to receive your ballot, you need to be certain that your local has your current mailing address. You have until October 18th to update your mailing address. I wouldn't wait until then. Do it as soon as you can. The first round of ballots will go out on October 17th, but there'll be subsequent opportunities to request a replacement ballot or if you don't receive your ballot. In order to assure that your ballot is received in a timely manner, it's highly recommended that you mail it by November 18th. So please be sure to do that. This election is being overseen by a federal monitor. You can go to uawmonitor.com/elections, uawmonitor.com/elections, and get more information about the candidates and the platforms and the election rules. Again, thank you to the candidates and the workers who organized this event. And thank all of you for participating in this essential democratic process. Be well. Solidarity to all. Good night.